The night crept in like a silent hunter, thick with the scent of smoke and damp soil. Crickets whispered through the tall grasses that curled around the mud huts of the village, but inside one of them, there was no peace, only the slow, deliberate crackle of fire. Shadows danced on the walls, flickering like spirits caught between worlds. Ao sat on a worn goatskin mat, her knees pressed tightly to her chest, her breath shallow. She didn't cry. She never did anymore. At 13, Ao had learned that tears were useless currency. They bought neither mercy nor escape. Her silence, however, well, that was something she could control. The fire in the center of the hut hissed as a smooth river stone rolled in the flames, its surface glowing red. Across the room, Mama Fari watched it closely, her thin lips pursed, her hand steady as death. Her voice came low and sweet like the purr of a snake. "Tonight, the spirit of your mother will try again. But I won't let her win." Ao said nothing. She knew this script by heart. Mama Fari's jealousy had been a quiet thing at first, polished smiles in daylight, tight fists behind closed doors. When Ao's mother died bringing her into the world, it left a space that no one dared name. Her father, mourning and hollowed, took Mama Fari as his wife in a season of drought, needing comfort more than love. Mama Fari had come with soft feet and a sharp tongue, whispering of evil spirits, of curses that rode in the blood of girls born during eclipses. Of women who died in childbirth not by accident but by witchcraft. She said Ao had been kissed by the wrong gods. Now, every night, when the village slept and the moon rose heavy and indifferent, Mama Fari would heat the stones and begin the ritual. She called it cleansing. She claimed the ancestors demanded it. The hot stone was lifted from the fire. Ao didn't flinch as Mama Fari stepped closer. She had trained herself not to. Her skin already bore the story, lines of blistered paths across her back, shoulders, thighs. She had memorized the scent of her own burning flesh. It no longer shocked her. It simply was. Mama Fari pressed the stone just below Ao's collarbone. The sizzle echoed like a demon's laugh in the silence. "This," Mama Fari hissed, "is to keep you pure." Ao gritted her teeth, staring straight ahead. The pain was a wave, crashing and pulling, but she rode it. She always did. Some part of her mind drifted far away, to the sound of her mother's voice, barely remembered but deeply rooted, like the scent of rain before it falls. The stone lifted. Another mark, another offering. She could feel her skin bubbling, swelling, screaming. But her mouth remained closed. Her silence was a cloak she wrapped tightly, even as her body betrayed her, shivering with agony. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the banana leaves. Somewhere an owl called. But within the hut, time had stilled, captured in the heat of that fire and the breathless space between two women, one wielding pain, the other absorbing it like the earth takes rain. When it was over, Mama Fari tossed the stone back into the fire and wiped her hands on her wrapper. "You may sleep now," she said, her voice empty. Ao lay down slowly, each movement slicing through her with fresh awareness of pain. She faced the wall, her face blank, her heart beating steady and fierce. She whispered to no one and everything, "I will not disappear." Outside, the moon bathed the world in silver, and the smoke curled up toward the heavens, carrying the scent of truth. The flames that kissed her skin did not break her, they baptized her. The morning sun rose slow and thick over the hills, stretching golden fingers across the village rooftops. Roosters crowed into the dust-heavy air, and smoke from breakfast fires painted soft ribbons against the sky. Ao stepped out of her father's compound before the others stirred, carrying her woven basket on her hip and her silence like armor. She moved through the village like a shadow, neither ignored nor embraced. The children no longer played tricks on her as they once did. Their mothers had warned them, "That girl carries bad luck. Look at her skin, it peels like snake hide." The whispers always followed her, soft but sharp. "She doesn't scream when she's hurt. Maybe she is cursed. Maybe the second wife is right." Ao kept her head down and her sleeves long, even in the smothering heat. The scars itched in the dry air, especially after a night of fire. But she didn't scratch. She didn't wince. She simply walked toward the fields beyond the village, where the cassava grew stubborn and the air smelled of sweat and earth. She sang softly to herself as she walked, a tune she didn't remember learning. It rose from somewhere deep, a lullaby stitched into her bones. It had no words, only a rhythm that made her feet lighter, made her heart beat steady when the world felt too sharp. The tune carried her across the fields as she worked, tugging weeds, shifting dry soil, nursing young stalks with hands calloused before their time. The sun climbed, blistering the sky. Sweat clung to her brow, salt stinging the raw patches under her blouse. She paused and straightened her back, looking toward the woods beyond the far ridge. They stood ancient and still, whispering secrets in a language she hadn't yet learned. Lately the nights brought dreams. Vivid, rich, and strange. Her mother would appear in them, not as a memory but as a presence, vibrant and full of light. She never stayed long. Sometimes she stood in water, her hair braided with cowrie shells. Other times she sat beneath a baobab tree, fingers tracing symbols in the dirt. She always spoke in riddles, but one phrase returned night after night. Child of fire, your pain is a map. Follow it. Ao didn't know what the words meant, but they stayed with her, like the scars, like the lullaby, like the silence she wore even in her sleep. By late afternoon she returned to the village to fetch water from the stream. The women gathered at the well like hens clucking around millet. Their eyes always found her. They didn't speak to her directly, but their voices rose as she passed, careless and cutting. She walks like a ghost. Her skin is always cracked, look at her arms. She never looks you in the eye. She must be hiding something. Ao kept her gaze on the path, gripping her calabash tightly. The water would cool the worst of the burns, but she had to be quick. Mama Fari didn't like her lingering in the stream. Water invites weakness, she often said. And you need to stay strong. That evening, after chores and supper served in silence, Ao slipped away to the storyteller's fire. She had started coming weeks ago, sitting at the edge of the circle where the shadows met the light. Baba Oja, the village griot, was older than most remembered. His hair was gray as moonlight, and his voice bore the weight of many lifetimes. When he spoke, the flames danced higher as if listening too. Tonight the story was about a girl who swallowed a stone and grew unbreakable bones. Another time, it was of a boy who walked into the spirit realm to retrieve his sister's laughter. The stories wrapped around Ao like cloth, softening the bruises beneath her skin. After the other children wandered home, Baba Oja turned toward her. His eyes were clouded but sharp. You listen well, little one? Ao nodded. She didn't speak, not at first. He leaned on his carved walking stick, smiling just slightly. You carry a quiet pain. She looked away, but he continued. There are two kinds of scars, he said. The kind that break you, and the kind that make you powerful. You must learn to tell the difference. Ao glanced at him, lips parting. But how do you know? He chuckled. Some say our scars speak. They whisper in dreams. They burn when truth is near. Yours, he nodded at her covered arms, are not ordinary. Something flickered in her chest. She hadn't told anyone about the dreams. She hadn't dared. And yet, here was this old man, speaking truths she'd barely allowed herself to think. The fire you carry, he said, his voice lower now, did not come to destroy you. It came to awaken you. She swallowed, her throat dry. I didn't ask for it. No warrior ever does, he said. But they walked the path anyway. The fire popped between them, sending sparks into the sky. Ao sat still, watching them rise. They reminded her of her dreams, fleeting, bright, full of messages she couldn't yet read. When she returned home that night, she found Mama Fari asleep. The hut was dark except for the dying embers in the fire pit. Ao knelt beside them, reaching her hands toward the warmth. Her palms tingled. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time she felt something deeper than fear rise within her. It was not hope exactly. It was something older. Something burning. Something watching the wind. The night hung thick with tension, hot and unmoving. Even the trees outside the compound seemed to hold their breath. Ao sat on the low stool near the hearth, pounding dried okra into powder. Each thud of the wooden pestle against the mortar echoed through her bones, louder than it should have in a hut so small. Mama Fari had been quiet all evening, too quiet, and Ao felt it like a change in wind, a shift before a storm. Earlier that day, Ao had lingered longer than usual at Baba Oja's fire. The old griot had spoken a tale that rang too closely to her own, of a girl carved by fire, watched by the spirits, called to rise when the world turned its back. His voice had dropped lower than usual as he looked directly at Ao. The child who wears her scars is marked by more than pain. The flame may bend her, but it cannot consume her. What neither of them saw was the shadow beyond the trees. Mama Fari, standing silent behind the tall banana leaves, listening with narrowed eyes and clenched fists. She had followed Ao in secret. And now, her fear churned into something sharper. Inside the hut, Ao felt the weight of her stepmother's gaze. She didn't dare look up, not even when Mama Fari stood and walked over with slow, deliberate steps. Her bare feet made no sound on the clay floor. She carried something in her hand, a thick metal bangle that shimmered in the firelight, its edges sharpened like teeth. "Remove your blouse," Mama Fari said. Ao froze. "Why?" Mama Fari's voice held no emotion. "Because tonight we complete the ritual. I've done everything. You question me now?" Her tone lashed like a whip. Reluctantly, Ao lifted her arms and slipped the thin cloth over her head, her skin already raw from the previous night. She braced herself for the stone, but instead felt cold oil run down her shoulder, then the iron ring pressed flat against her skin. The pain was instant, white-hot and different from the usual burns. This wasn't cleansing. This was branding. Ao screamed, a sound ripped from the deepest part of her, echoing through the hut, swallowed by the thatched roof. The metal seared into her skin, carving a symbol she didn't recognize but would never forget, a broken spiral flanked by slashes. "This is the mark of shame," Mama Fari hissed. "Let the spirits know what you truly are." Ao collapsed to the mat, body shaking, breath coming in short, panicked bursts. Her vision blurred. Her shoulder pulsed with unbearable heat, the smell of cooked flesh rising like incense. But Mama Fari said no more. She turned and walked into the darkness, leaving Ao curled in pain, the fire flickering low. Hours passed. The wound festered quickly. By dawn, Ao's skin around the mark had turned purple-black, oozing hot to the touch. Fever seized her. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. Her breath became shallow, her fingers twitching in jerks. The ceiling spun above her as her vision dimmed. And then the world went silent. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer in the hut. She stood in a forest that pulsed with light. Blue fire ran along the trees like veins. The air hummed with a strange, melodic sorrow. The sky above was cracked like pottery, stars bleeding through the gaps. Leaves shimmered in colors that had no name. She felt no pain here. Only a strange lightness, as if her body were a whisper. Before her, the trees parted. From the shadows, girls emerged, young, old, scarred, luminous. Their eyes glowed softly and their skin bore marks like hers. Burns, brands, welts. One girl stepped forward, her cheek split by a deep scar that glimmered like gold thread. "We've been waiting, Ao," she said. "Where am I?" Ao asked, her voice sounding distant in her own ears. "This is the forest of the broken-skinned," said another, taller and crowned in feathers. "Where the girls who were burned, beaten, cast out, come to remember who they are." Ao looked down at herself. Her body bore every scar she had ever known, but now they shimmered faintly, like molten silver beneath her skin. "I don't understand," she whispered. The girls circled her, gentle hands reaching out, not to hurt but to affirm. "You were never weak," the feathered girl said. "You were chosen." "Chosen for what?" "To become what others fear," the first girl said. "A guardian. A mirror. A flame that does not ask for permission to burn." Ao's knees buckled. She fell into the soft, glowing moss. "I didn't want this." "No one does," a voice said behind her. A woman stood there now, tall, radiant, wrapped in fire that did not consume her. Her eyes were sad but her mouth smiled. Ao knew her. "Mama?" The woman nodded. "Child of fire. Your pain is a map. Follow it." "I'm so tired." "I know. But you're not done yet." Ao looked around at the faces, the survivors, the spirit girls, the mother she lost. For the first time, she saw her own reflection ripple in the pool beside her. She did not look broken. She looked powerful, terrible, beautiful. "You are the one who survives the flame," the girls chanted in unison, their voices a rising storm of thunder and warmth. "You carry the pain of many. You will carry them home." A gust of wind swept through the forest, carrying ash and memory. The stars above flared bright. And then, silence. Ao gasped as her eyes opened. The fever had broken. She lay on the mat, the morning light cutting sharp lines across the floor. Her body ached but she was alive. She sat up slowly, clutching her shoulder. The wound still burned, but not with infection. With something else. Something alive. She pulled aside her blouse, staring at the brand. The skin around it shimmered faintly, the mark glowing like an ember buried in flesh. She touched it and felt a surge of heat, not pain but power. Outside, the wind picked up suddenly, swirling ash from the fire pit into the air. Ao closed her eyes and let the warmth rise in her. The dreams were real. The forest was real. And something inside her had awakened. The flames had tried to destroy her. But now they answered to her. The days that followed her fever blurred like smoke in the dry season, strange, vivid, and unsteady. But Ao felt it with every breath. Something inside her had shifted. It began with the fire. When she returned to the hearth for her morning chores, she knelt to stoke the embers. The moment her fingers brushed the coals, she felt a flicker, not of pain but of presence. The fire stirred, responding as if it knew her. When she leaned closer, she could swear it whispered. Not in words exactly. More like feeling wrapped in heat. Wait, watch, listen. She stared into the flames and the world around her slowed. A sudden flash, Mama Fari's footsteps approaching from behind, and Ao turned just before the woman entered. Too early. Too quiet. Suspicious. Mama Fari froze at the threshold, surprised to see Ao already watching her. The scar on Ao's shoulder throbbed once, then stilled. She stood slowly, meeting her stepmother's gaze with an expression she hadn't worn before. One of knowing. Mama Fari blinked, then looked away. That afternoon, as Ao fetched water from the stream, her hand brushed a sun-baked rock, and she didn't flinch. Not even as the heat seared into her palm. She picked it up and held it. Her skin remained untouched. The warmth pulsed through her like a drumbeat. She was no longer afraid of heat. Later that night, while sweeping the courtyard, Ao felt a sudden chill, just for a second, followed by a ripple in the air. She paused, listening. The wind shifted. She looked up, and just as she did, a heavy clay pot fell from the kitchen roof, shattering where she had stood moments ago. That was the third time she had known something just before it happened. That evening she returned to Baba Oja's fire. He was alone, as if expecting her. "You are glowing, child," he said without turning. Ao sat beside him. "Something's happening to me." He nodded slowly, pulling a folded piece of cloth from within his wrapper. From it he withdrew a thin piece of old bark, cracked and inked with symbols. "There is a tale," he began, voice lower than usual, too old for many to remember. "Of a girl born in fire, with skin marked by suffering. She would walk among us unchosen, unloved, but inside her, the spirits would store a weapon. A shield made not of iron but of pain turned to power." He handed the bark to her. The symbol inked on it was a spiral surrounded by flame. It matched the mark on her shoulder. "Some say she is cursed," Baba Oja said. "Others say she is salvation." Ao traced the lines with trembling fingers. "What is she meant to do?" "She is to stand when others fall. To carry what others fear. When the shadow comes for the village, she will be our first and last defense." Ao's mouth was dry. "And if she doesn't want to be that? Then the darkness wins." They sat in silence as the fire popped and whispered between them. The next morning Mama Fari was different. Her movements, usually sharp and quick, were now slow, cautious. Her eyes followed Ao like a hawk watching a snake it once thought was harmless. She served Ao porridge for breakfast, sweetened with honey. Unusual. Ao stared at the bowl. Her stomach growled, but something inside her turned cold. She dipped her finger into the gruel and waited. The moment the paste touched her skin, the scar on her shoulder heated, glowing faintly under her blouse. The porridge darkened at the edges. The honey bubbled, turned sour. Poison. Ao raised her eyes. Mama Fari stood at the doorway, hands folded, face unreadable. Ao lifted the spoon to her mouth. Slowly. Mama Fari tensed. But the moment the poisoned food touched her lips, the fire in her blood surged. A warmth bloomed in her chest, sweeping through her veins. The poison burned, but it did not break her. It melted like wax against the flame. She looked up. Her eyes locked on Mama Fari's. And she smiled. Mama Fari turned and fled. That night Ao ran. She slipped from the hut while the stars were still thick and the moon hung low. She wore no shoes. She brought no food. Only the wrapped bark from Baba Oja and the heat singing in her blood. She followed the path beyond the cassava fields, past the river where crocodiles never slept, and into the forest edge where the villagers warned children never to tread. But Ao wasn't a child anymore. The trees welcomed her. Branches bent back. Roots shifted aside. The fire within her guided her steps. Each footfall was lit by moonlight, and with every breath, the wind carried fragments of voices she had heard only in dreams. Child of fire. Daughter of pain. Follow the map written in your skin. She walked for hours. Maybe days. Time folded inside the trees. At one point she stopped to rest near an old termite mound. She pressed her hand into the earth and felt the spirits hum below the soil. That night she dreamed again. She stood in the forest of the broken-skinned. The girls were there, their eyes glowing. Her mother stood among them, fire licking her feet, her voice steady and strong. "You are not running away," she said. "You are returning to the fire that made you." Ao opened her hand. The scars on her palm pulsed like coals. From them, a flicker of orange light rose, a shield, round and curved, made entirely of glowing patterns etched by every pain she had endured. It hovered, warm and alive, vibrating with memory. "This is yours," the spirit said. "It was always yours." Ao reached out and gripped it. The shield responded with a rush of heat and wind and song. It fit against her arm like it had been waiting for her all her life. She awoke just before dawn. The trees around her shimmered faintly in the early light. Her shoulder throbbed. The brand glowed steadily now, no longer a wound but a crest. She stood, brushing off leaves and dirt, and looked deeper into the forest. The fire in her blood did not crave revenge. It craved purpose. She walked forward. Not as prey, but as prophecy. The forest deepened around Ao, dark and endless, yet alive with breath and presence. Vines coiled like serpents, flowers bloomed under moonlight, and every step she took pulsed with memory. She felt it in her bones. This was no ordinary forest. It whispered in rhythms older than words, and though no path was marked, her feet never faltered. Then the trees parted, suddenly, silently, revealing a clearing bathed in amber light. The earth glowed beneath her, soft, breathing, warm like skin. In the center stood a stone structure carved with symbols that moved when she blinked, as if language itself was alive. Fire flickered from the cracks in the ground, not wild or hungry but watching. She had reached the forge of ancestors. Ao stepped forward. The moment her bare foot touched the glowing floor, the air thickened. Her scars tingled, responding to something ancient. She took another step, then another, until the wind changed and a voice like molten iron poured from the sky. "You've come far, child of pain." From the flames rose a figure, tall, robed in smoke and embers, her hair an inferno braided with gold. Her skin shimmered like obsidian kissed by lightning, and her eyes burned with eternal memory. "I am Mba the Fire Mother," the spirit said. "I was the first to carry the flame and not be consumed. And now, I will teach you to carry your own." Ao bowed her head. "I don't know if I'm ready." "No one ever is," Mba replied, stepping down from the fire. "But your scars have begun to speak. Let us teach you how to listen." The training began without words. 4 days, or weeks, for time had no rules here, Ao moved through the sanctuary under Mba's guidance. She learned how to breathe with the fire, to sit in silence as it told its stories. She lay across stones that pulsed with the pain of generations and listened as the spirits of scarred women sang their truths into her ears. Each night, the fires seared her anew, but not with harm. They traced the marks already on her body, lighting up the lines, transforming pain into pattern. Her scars began to glow like runes, each one a symbol, for endurance, for memory, for strength. Mba called them the marks of becoming. "Each scar you wear," she said, "is a thread in your armor. Not armor to hide behind, but to walk through the world unafraid." And then came the scar shield. One morning, Ao awoke to find the sanctuary silent. No wind. No flames. Only herself standing alone. She looked at her arms and the runes shimmered, calling, stretching, forming patterns across her skin. They began to shift, spiraling down her arm, weaving together into a pulse of energy that wrapped itself around her forearm. A shield born from within her. Alive. It unfolded from her skin like a song returning to its chorus, round, golden, flickering with firelight, each rune circling its center like dancers around a drum. Mba appeared behind her, her expression solemn. "You've summoned it," she said. "It is part of you now. A shield made not of metal but of memory. Not to protect you from the world, but to reflect it, to remind it of your truth." Ao raised the shield. It felt weightless yet indestructible. A heartbeat lived within it. Her heartbeat. "But the shield is not complete," Mba warned. "Not until you pass the final test." Ao lowered it slowly. "What test?" Mba's face darkened. "You must return to your wound, not the one on your body but the one in your spirit. The fire that made you powerful can also consume you. You must face the one who hurt you most." Ao's hands tightened. She knew. "Mama Fari. Will I have to destroy her?" she asked. Mba shook her head. "That choice is not mine to make. But know this, the flame will offer you vengeance and it will be sweet. But true power comes from choosing the path no one expects." And with that, the fire rose around Ao, no longer gentle. It towered high, walls of flame encircling her, roaring, shaking the sky. She was pulled inward, eyes wide, body aflame, but she did not burn. She stood in the center of the inferno and the world transformed. She was no longer in the sanctuary. She was back in the hut. The night of the branding. The iron bangle in Mama Fari's hand. the smell of oil and rage, the pain yet to come. Ao stood between them, her younger self on the mat, trembling, and Mama Fari, eyes glowing with hate. Flames licked the walls. Time froze. The shield pulsed in her hand. This was the moment. The wound that never closed. Her rage rose like a tidal wave. She could end it now. She could strike. She could return pain with pain and be justified. The fire begged her. It showed her the relief in vengeance, the freedom in fury. But then, she saw Mama Fari's face. Not just the hatred, not just the anger, but the fear underneath, the smallness, the scars Mama Fari carried, hidden under years of bitterness. And she saw herself. Not broken, not begging, but whole. Ao lowered the shield. She walked to Mama Fari and placed her glowing hand over the mark she had once received. "You will not own me," she whispered. "And I will not become you." The flames screamed. Then stilled. The vision shattered like glass, and Ao stood once more in the sanctuary, breathless. MBA watched her with a quiet pride. "You chose truth over fire. You forgave." Ao nodded, eyes shining. "It was the only way to keep my soul." MBA stepped forward and placed her hand over Ao's heart. The final rune etched itself onto her skin, a spiral bound by flame, surrounded by water. Balance. The fire dimmed. The sanctuary quieted. "You are ready," MBA said. "Go. Your people will need you." And the forest, ancient and wild, opened once more. The first to see her thought she was a ghost. Ao stepped out of the forest just as dawn peeled the night from the sky, mist curling around her feet like old spirits come to bear witness. Her skin, still dark as rich soil, held a soft shimmer beneath it, a glow not visible unless the light caught her just right. Her hair was loose now, wild and free, and she walked like someone who feared nothing, not even silence. She wore no shoes, no jewelry, no weapons. And yet, the wind bowed as she passed. Children peered from behind huts, whispering her name as if it were a prayer or a warning. Is it her? But she disappeared weeks ago. Why is she glowing? The women at the well turned their heads, startled. One dropped her gourd. Another clutched her baby tighter, watching with uncertain eyes. By the time Ao reached the heart of the village, a quiet crowd had gathered, drawn by the same invisible thread: curiosity, awe, and something they couldn't name, fear perhaps, or shame. And then Mama Fari appeared. Her voice broke through the silence like a whip. "She returns in secret like a witch does. This girl, this thing, left her family, defied her elders, wandered into cursed land. Look at her. She carries spirits on her skin." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd, but they were softer than before. Fewer voices echoed her rage. Ao stood still, watching Mama Fari with calm eyes. The woman was thinner now, tighter, as though eaten from the inside out. Her voice held panic beneath its sharpness. "She disrespected me," Mama Fari shouted, stepping forward. "She poisoned this home with her silence, and now she returns as if she is queen. Elders, say something." The village elders, cloaked in white and seated beneath the sacred baobab tree, watched silently. Baba Oja was among them, older now, his eyes clouded, but he smiled when he saw Ao. Ao finally spoke. Her voice rang clear across the crowd. "You say I returned in secret, but I return in truth." She stepped forward and removed the cloth that covered her shoulders. A hush fell. Her scars shimmered, the symbols glowing softly, runic and radiant. They were not wounds. They were marks, sacred, powerful. Fire-kissed and spirit-bound. "I bore your burns in silence," Ao said, her voice steady, eyes locked on Mama Fari. "I was 13 when you pressed fire to my skin and called it cleansing. I did not scream. Not because I was weak, but because no one would listen." A gust of wind blew through the gathering, lifting dust and dead leaves. Ao's hair rose slightly with it, and the air trembled. "You called me cursed. But I was being forged." The sky darkened, almost unnaturally. The clouds gathered as if summoned, heavy and bruised with rain. Thunder rumbled in the distance. The elders shifted uneasily. The people clutched their garments, looking up. Ao lifted her arm, and the scar shield unfolded from her skin in a flash of light and warmth. It hovered beside her, pulsing like a living heart. The crowd gasped, some dropped to their knees. Baba Oja's voice rose. "The prophecy. It was true. I call to the fire," Ao said. And the fire answered. Thunder cracked overhead. From the clouds, flames spilled, not to burn but to judge. It swept through the village like wind, circling Ao once, then spiraling upward. In it, voices sang, voices of the forest, the broken-skinned girls, the ancestors. The fire did not harm anyone. Except one. Mama Fari fell to the ground, clutching her chest, eyes wide in terror. Her hands trembled. No, 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 don't let them take me. But the fire did not touch her. She was untouched, unscorched, completely safe. And yet, she crawled backward, away from the light. Away from Ao. Her body shook with fear as the fire surrounded her, not as threat but as truth. They see you, Ao said softly. And they know. Mama Fari let out a long, broken sob. Then she stood, stumbled and fled, past the well, past the staring villagers into the hills beyond. No one followed. There was no need. She was exiled not by decree, not by punishment but by her own fear. The fire had shown her what she was. The thunder faded. The clouds cleared. And the village turned to Ao. One elder rose. He stepped forward, removed the beads from around his neck and placed them in her hands. We did not see, he said. We did not hear. We failed you. Ao looked at the crowd. You didn't fail me, she said. You forgot yourselves. But there is still time to remember. Baba Oja chuckled softly. She wears no crown, he murmured. But she reigns nonetheless. From that day on, Ao became more than the girl who returned. She became the one who taught. She did not sit in the elders' circle, nor demand obedience. Instead, she gathered children beneath the baobab tree and taught them stories of strength, of pain turned into power. She showed girls how to trace their scars with ash and honey, how to speak without shame of their hurts. She taught boys that strength was not silence, and that listening was a warrior's skill. She lit small fires in the evenings, not for warmth but for remembering. Around them people came to unburden their pain, to ask questions, to learn. The fire no longer frightened them. And the scar shield? It became legend. Some said it vanished when not needed. Others said it lived inside her, glowing brighter each time she helped someone name their wound without fear. Ao never spoke of Mama Fari again. She had passed her test. She had chosen to forgive and in doing so broken the chain. Her scars still shimmered, but now they were mirrored by those who followed her. Not as burns but as symbols, as stories. And every time the wind changed, the fire would rise just slightly, and the villagers would whisper, not in fear, but in reverence. The seasons turned like pages in a book written by wind and fire. The cassava grew thick in the fields again. The river swelled and receded. Children who once watched Ao with wide, uncertain eyes now greeted her with laughter and reverence. She had become more than a girl, more than even a woman. She was a story made flesh. Ao had no title, but people gave her names anyway. Fire Daughter. Keeper of Ash. The one who returned. But the name that stayed, the one whispered with the most love and awe, was Mother of the Scar Shield. She never claimed power. Yet the village moved to her rhythm. Elders consulted her before rituals. Women brought her their daughters when they woke screaming from dreams they couldn't explain. Men stepped aside in quiet respect when she walked past. She lived in a simple hut beneath the same baobab tree that once heard her name called in whispers. Now it stood like a sentinel, its bark etched with spirals and sigils matching those on Ao's skin. Her scars had not faded. They had bloomed. Each one, once raw and angry, now pulsed with meaning, runes of survival, of vision, of healing. When she stood before the village fire, the patterns danced along her arms, her shoulders, her back. Children traced them in the sand. Women wove them into cloth. Drummers carved them into wood, their beats echoing her rhythm long into the night. Girls came from distant places, on foot, in caravans, on the backs of donkeys and dreams. Some were quiet and bruised, others angry and defiant. All of them carried the same weight, pain that had nowhere to go. Ao welcomed them with open arms. She taught them how to listen to fire without fear, how to hear their scars rather than hide them. She showed them how to summon their own shields, not just with magic but with voice, with memory, with refusal to vanish. She trained them in the art of becoming. One girl, from the salt plains to the north, had lost her mother to raiders. Ao taught her how to grieve through rhythm, how to carve her sorrow into drumbeats until they shook the ground. Another girl, once silenced by shame, learned how to speak again by singing old chants into the wind. With each child who healed, the scar shield grew stronger, not as an object but as a legacy. One evening, as stars spread across the sky like scattered embers, Baba Oja sat beneath the baobab. He was nearly blind now, his eyes clouded like river stones. Ao sat beside him, holding his hand. He chuckled, voice thin but clear. You have become the story, child. She smiled. I only followed the path the fire lit for me. He turned his face toward her, reaching to touch the glowing scars on her forearm. You did more than that. You made the fire listen. You taught it to remember. Then he said, almost like a hymn, she did not wear armor, she wore truth. His words traveled far. That night, a new griot began to tell Ao's tale. A young woman with braids like woven vines and a voice that carried like thunder through rain. She stood before the fire and sang. Once there was a girl who was burned every night, until her pain grew teeth, and her silence became a song. She walked through the fire and named it. She turned her scars into a shield, and her shield into a story. And now we tell it so no child forgets. The fire is not always our enemy. Sometimes it is the ancestor reminding us, we still live. The children listened wide-eyed, their feet swinging over the edges of stools, their hearts beating in time with the drum. The women hummed low, voices braided in memory. Even the men, who had once turned their faces away from suffering they didn't understand, now nodded in solemn agreement. The legend of the scarred shield spread beyond the village. Hunters told it around traveling fires. Traders spoke of it in hushed tones in distant markets. Mothers whispered it to crying daughters. Griots across the land added it to their night-long performances, always ending with the same line. The fire did not break her. It built her. Ao never asked to be remembered. But she lived in every story told, every scar that no longer hid in shame. The forest that once held her in trial became a place of pilgrimage. The baobab beneath which she taught became sacred. And the scar shield lived on, not in a museum or a shrine, but in the way girls walked taller, in the way pain became something spoken instead of buried, in the way silence became song. Years later, when the village faced drought, it was Ao who led the people in a chant not of pleading but of power. And when the rains came back, they did so with thunder, rolling over the sky like the voice of ancestors rejoicing. Ao stood in the rain, arms lifted, face turned to the clouds. And her scars shone like lightning. The stars blinked gently above, and the night air was thick with wood smoke and memory. A fire crackled in the center of the compound, casting warm shadows across the faces of a gathered family. The youngest, a girl no older than 10, leaned her head against her grandmother's knee, eyes wide, heart full. "Grandma," she whispered, voice soft as wind brushing leaves, "was she real?" The question floated up like a prayer, like a dare, carried on the drifting ash. The others paused, their gazes drawn to the woman who had seen more seasons than most trees could remember. Her face was carved by time, her back bent slightly from years of harvest, but her eyes held the same shimmer the flames did. She looked down at the child, smiled, and without speaking, pulled the fabric off her shoulder. There, just below the collarbone, was a small, twisted scar, old, faded, but unmistakable. The girl reached out and touched it with reverent fingers. "Realer than fire," the grandmother said. "She lives in every girl who survives." The wind stirred again as though in agreement. Around the fire, silence held for a long, respectful moment. Then came the sound, low and haunting, of a hum. It came from the grandmother's throat, ancient and trembling, a tune that was both lullaby and battle cry. Others began to hum it too, the mother, the aunts, the older cousins. A melody woven from ash and breath. The little girl listened closely. It was a song she had heard before in dreams she didn't understand. Words without words. A tune that pressed gently against her chest. The fire popped. And the grandmother began to sing. She walked through flame and the flame did not take her. It gave her its name. She bore the burn and the burn became song. She fell in silence, but silence gave her voice. And the voice became a shield. And the shield became a story. And the story became us. The flames lifted with the rhythm, as if remembering the girl who had once stood alone beneath the baobab tree, her scars shining like stars. The wind danced through the trees, carrying the melody beyond the compound, over hills and into forests where spirits stirred and listened. The little girl leaned into her grandmother again, her eyes fluttering shut, the song still cradling her. In the quiet, the fire glowed a little brighter. It did not burn. It lit the path.